Well, hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today, what we're trying to do today would be to create a CLI application in Rust, of course, and we'll be doing this using the clap create. And what we'll be doing would be probably similar to something like what I have here already. So I could do something like Cardinal build, and I copy the output of the build, which should be at target, and then of course debug, and then it should be called adrs.exe, and I put it in the root. And what is going to happen is that it should be able to build this app for me, and of course the compiled binary I should have in the root, as you can see over here. And now basically what this is actually is an ADR. If you don't know what this is basically architecture decision records. So if you're working in a large team and you have to constantly, it doesn't even matter how often you have to, but when you have to make changes to the architecture or design, and you normally of course have to document what you are changing and of course why you are changing it. And these are documented as mostly as markdown files, and this can of course be checked into your Git repository, for example, for of course source control. And then you can, the point is that you and the people you're working with should be able to look back in time and try to understand what's possible, what changes that have taken effect within that project and why those changes actually happened. And so I am currently working on a CLI application that would basically help to do that. And I can also show you what it looks like right now. So if I try to, of course, use this compile binary, and I can say edge to show me the possible commands, and you will see that I have ADR, I have project, and then I have config. So what I'm trying to do is that I'm grouping the major commands within this app into three major sections. So ADR will be when you actually work with basically creating these ADR files, and all that's whatever that's really need to do within those topics. And then projects, I wanted to give this a little bit of a twist. I want to make it possible that you can use, of course, the same CLI to manage the ADR for as many projects as you would want. So you can have like say 5, 10 projects, and you can manage all of them, of course, from these central points using the CLI. And of course, config is exactly what it sounds like. So this is where I'm able to make some initial configurations. They're specific to the this copy of the software itself and not the project. The projects are individually managed, so they have, of course, individual configurations. And so what I can also show you, so let's, for example, look at a say ADR, and I can also say ADR edge for help. And these are the commands I can see here. Okay, and I can also do the same for projects. So I can say project and help. And these are the commands, as you can see here, that I can, the sub commands more or less that are under the project's sub command. So I can do something like this, projects and maybe list. And now I see that I have not created any projects actually. And now I can actually say project new. And of course, I don't need to remember every of the flags and all that. I can always use the H flag to tell me what I need to do. So this, I need to provide a path and a name. And I can, of course, quickly do that. So I can say path would be, I can say maybe ADR files, something like this. Doesn't really matter. This, of course, this should point to an actual project. And of course, you can also use absolute paths if you want to, of course, say start from home and, of course, then navigate to the actual projects directory. And then the next thing, of course, I need to provide would be the name. And I can actually do it this way. Path would be equal to say ADR files, and I say name. So name would be equal to, I can call this sample project, something like this. And now you see it's was able to of course create this for me. And what I can actually now do is to come back in here and list the projects. And now you see here I have my sample project created. And of course for this project that I know ADR's files created already. So now what I can do is something like I go back in here and I can say ADR init. And so of course I have not, because this is written in such a way that I can actually use it to manage multiple projects. So now I have not set a default project, more or less setting the project I'm currently or I would currently want to work on. So now I get this error. That's also totally fine. So I can again come back in here and do help. Again, remember, I don't need to remember all the flags. It doesn't really matter. And so at this point, of course, I see the possible commands here within ADR at least. So what I can do now is I can clear the screen, and now I would like to go to projects and again help. And now I see there is a sub command here called switch. So now I can say ADR projects switch, and again I can provide my help to actually tell me what I need to do. So now I see I simply need to provide a flag pointing to the our current project I would want to switch to. And that was, of course, also why we had to create the initial project. So now I can do something like this projects and list. And now we have this project here. I'm probably just going to copy the name, doesn't really matter. And then I come back in here. And now I can say project, and then I provide this project, and now we have switched to that project. So now I can again do ADR, and then I can say ADR, this will be the sub command, and now I say init, and now this should create an init file for me. So if you remember, I provided this, of course, as the path, and then if I look in here, I'll have my first initial ADR created for me here. So this is the format, and I can actually now come in here and start filling in the other things I would need to fill in here. And again, if I want to work on, again, like I showed you for the multiple projects, again, I have the option of doing that. So this is really what I am currently working on. And again, our tutorial today would really be centered on this. I'm going to show you how you can set something like this up. And it doesn't, of course, have to do with the topic that I'm talking about right here, but it could be for anything you are, say, working in your team. It could be I don't know, something like you would want to, let's say, provide, let's say you're working with let's say the customer support, for example, and maybe there is no plans to have build some interesting tool, I don't know, for them to maybe go to some server and then make some entries or whatever the case might be, or retrieve data or whatever. So you could, of course, instead of having to build a backend, build a front end, and then all that whatever shenanigans that goes with it, just for them to maybe writing some record somewhere or retrieve some record, you can actually, maybe this could actually come in handy to create an app, a CLI application for them that they could use to, let's say, make a simple, I don't know, you could call it whatever, maybe you can call it, your app could actually be called, let's say, CUST-SUP for customer support, and you can say something like maybe tickets, to create a new ticket, and then you can provide a ticket, or you can maybe a command like this to fetch all tickets, and then you can say or open tickets, whatever the case may be. There is so much you can actually do with an app like this, but without, let's not talk too much about this. I'm just going to go ahead and now and show you how you can actually set this up. So let's jump right in and start writing some code. So I'm right here in my terminal, and what I can actually do is to go to my desktop, and I have a folder called personal projects, and I have one called YouTube, and then I have Rust. And what is the problem? Command not found. Which command was not found? Um, sorry. So let's say cd desktop personal projects YouTube Rust. Okay, and now we are in here, and I can actually see to see what's actually in here, and now I can create a new project. I can actually maybe call this Rust CLI, whatever, doesn't really matter. And maybe for us, we can probably build one that's, we would, let's say we want to build something that's we're going to use to retrieve data from. So we will build something in line, just thinking about it, we can actually build something for, let's say, customer support. We would want the customer support to have a CLI application that they can set up locally, and then they can maybe, for this simple example, retrieve, say, user information, something like this, or maybe check the number of users that have signed up, or check the number of, I don't know, messages, whatever the case might be. And that's really what we're going to do. So I'm going to go call this actually CUST-SUP. So this is the project would be working on today. So mkdr CUST-SUP. So we've created, I don't know why it says this for the first time, doesn't really make, okay, I said mdkir, my bad. So I can actually open this now, CUST-SUP. And I'm just going to close this and bring this over here. And I hope this is now visible. So I'm going to close all of this. And so now we have our new app, and I can say cargo init. And now we have our simple app. So we can now say cargo run. And we of course should get our hello world. So let's start setting things up already. Maybe I'm just going to come in here and create a readme file. Just so we have an idea. I will be doing this on the fly, and it may not be so nitty gritty when it comes to detail, but the most important is I'll try to share them with you. And so here I'm gonna call this would be CUST-SUP. This would be our app for customer support, whatever. So I'm gonna define features that it's gonna have. So it's going to have a couple of features. So it should be able to, we would have a list command that's going to go ahead and list our users in the database. And it's going to have one that's maybe say delete. So it will delete, of course, it will delete a user. Or maybe I'm just going to change this to tickets. So we would be working with tickets. So it's going to delete a ticket. And it's going to maybe update or maybe update the status of a ticket, something like this. And it's going to be really simple like this. And so these are the simple features that our app is going to have. And what I can do, maybe I can have like a setup. So within the setup, I want to see like the possible commands and sub commands we would have. So on the top level, I want us to have, let's say, config. So we should be able to do config related stuff. And on the second level, I want us to do something like, this is actually when we do ticket stuff. So on the top level, there's going to be config and tickets. Then on the tickets, we would now, of course, have, and that's when we will now be able to do all of this list, delete, and update. I want to indent these guys. Is there another way to do this? I think this is it. Let me preview and see what that actually looks like. Yeah, something like this, but I think it's actually too, anyways, I think it's fine. So this is really what we'll be doing today. It's going to be pretty straightforward, but again, the concept are all going to remain the same. Nothing so fancy about it, actually. Okay, so let me close these things up and let's actually start writing some code. So in here, I would like to maybe create a couple of folders. So this I'm going to call this ticket. So everything regarding ticket is going to live in here. And I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call this utils. So in here, I would like to separate, of course, all the logic that would, for example, go to fetch data from the database and all stuff like that. And then within the ticket, of course, would now consume those commands, of course. And then in the root, I would like to so in the root, I would like to create a folder called CMD. CMD is going to be for command, and then this is actually where this ticket is going to be. So within here, I would again create a new folder and I'll call this config. So every command relating to config is going to be inside of here. And now we have our utils, of course. So in here, I can now maybe bring those into scope and say pub mod. Of course, we don't have any mod files or whatever right now, so I'm going to say mod.rs. And then in here again, I'm going to create one mod.rs example, and then we'll come back in here and we'll say pod mod, come on, utils, and pub mod command. Okay, so this is where we are right now. And of course, I'm going to copy this, dump it in here, dump it in here. So that's in here. Again, I can say pub, come on, don't waste my time, pub mod config, pub mod tickets like this. So now we have everything actually set up. So now the next thing, of course, for us would be to install the dependencies that would be needing, and then we'll jump in. And I don't want us to waste time in here actually. So I gotta save this one. So let's continue. So when it comes to the dependencies, the first thing I like us to, the most important thing, of course, would be clap. So clap is a crate in Rust that's going to allow us to actually create, bring all of this together. So the version, I'm going to specify version 4.5.4. And of course, features, I'm going to just say the drive like this. And apart from clap, I would, of course, maybe, should I do I use anyhow? So, okay, let me take it. No, I need log. And for log, it should be 0.4.12, sorry, 21. And logger, so this would be 0.11.3, 0.11.3. And what else? Of course, I need cd. So again, this would be version 1.0. And features, of course, would still be derive. And again, I need cd. Do I need cd JSON? I don't think so. So let's start with these ones, and then let's see what we need and what we actually do not need. Okay, so I will also probably need a couple more dependencies, and maybe one of them would be chrono, because I would like to maybe add some logs, I don't know, just to indicate when something had actually happened, so we can actually track that. So let's really jump right in and start writing some code. This is really going to be quite simple and straightforward in my opinion. And so I'm just going to bring this down a little bit so we have some room up here to see what's actually going on. So again, remember what we said. We would like to have, of course, tickets. We would like to have configs. Config is going to help us, of course, do some configuration setups and all that. And then tickets themselves will actually do the actual work. So it should retrieve, update, whatever it is we would want to do, lists and stuff like that. And so I would like to define a struct. The struct is going to define like our base command. So it's going to be like our main top level command, of which every other sub comments would actually become part of this. I'm not just going to name it CLI. So I'm going to create a struct and I'll call it CLI. And for now, it's just going to have just one attribute. And I'm just going to call it command. And those attributes, I'm just going to call them root command. Okay, so what I'm trying to do here is to define our root command. It's going to be called CLI. So, and under this command, I want us to have subcommands. Okay, and for us to have subcommands, I will need to annotate this variable here that I defined. So I have to call this command and again subcommand like this. And for me to do this, of course, again, I need to annotate the struct itself with some traits. So I would like to start with the quite basic ones. So I would like to have debug here. And then apart from debug, I would like to have parser. So parser should actually come from the the clap package. So I can simply say use clap. And here I can now look for parser. I also want sub command, this one. Okay, now I have parser, and let's continue our definitions. Actually, I may not really need debug here, so I'm just going to get rid of it for now. I'll add it if we actually do need it. So again, I need to add some more traits. So I can add one command. So from here, I need to provide a couple of arguments. And one of them would be version. I need about. Also need long. I'm probably going to set this to none for now, but of course, you can set it to an actual string when you start developing yours. And I'm also going to maybe add one more command. So in here, I'm just going to add an argument propagate version. And I'm going to set this one to true. So propagate, I'm setting this one to true. And so this would, of course, form our base commands, but of course, this one is not yet defined. So I need to, of course, define what this root command means. So I'm just going to maybe come above our CLI again. And up here, I define an enum this time, not a struct. So I'm just going to call it root command. And now this is actually where I define the main, like the top level sub command I would like us to have. So the first one, of course, will be config. The next one would be ticket. So every other command we have will be grouped under this. And of course, I need to annotate this again with a trait. Of course, I need to be the this sub command trait. Okay, and now this should be fine. So now we have our base command, and our base command will of course have these other attributes. Okay, and now I can come back to main. So instead of just saying hello world, I'm just gonna maybe get rid of this, of course. And then now I initialize my CLI. So I'm just gonna use small letter here. And I say CLI, and of course it gets a parse command. So now I have my CLI, and now what I need to do now is of course match the commands that actually come within our main subcommand. So I can simply say match, and I'm looking at the commands attribute of our CLI. And now of course, as you can already tell, I have two arms I need to match for now. So the first one would be root command, and I say config. So if this command is matched for now, I'm just gonna maybe print in the console and say something like hello from the what's maybe I'll just make it a little bit interesting and say this is the config sub command, something like this. I'm probably just gonna copy it, and then I handle of course the second arm. So again, root command, and now I have ticket. So if this command is matched, what do I want to do? I also want to just print something like this. As you can see, it's really simple and pretty straightforward to work with clap. And now if I clear my screen, for example, and try to come back to this, I can simply say cargo run. And now I see, let's see what we actually get on the terminal. So on the terminal, of course, it terminates because no command was actually matched. If we want to make this interesting, we can also maybe even add a default here if we want, but that's not so interesting for me for now. So, but the interesting thing now is I am aware that I have these two subcommands. And now instead of just doing this, I can now say config and maybe help. And now, of course, I should get this. But if I actually want to invoke the command itself, because trying to do it this way, exactly what I did would be if this config has subcommands, would now have the option, of course, internet to do subcommands. But if I want to invoke itself, I'm just going to say like this. And now you see here, we get, this is the config subcommand. And again, as you can already imagine, if I do exactly the same thing for, come on, what happened? Oh, my terminal was frozen there for a minute. Anyways, if I come back here now and I can say, apart from config, I can now say tickets, and it should also tell us that it visited the ticket subcommand. So as simple and pretty straightforward as it is. So what we can also actually do now is pretty straightforward. I can actually go into the folders we defined initially, and then of course, maybe move this information over there, for example. So if you look into say config, I actually just came in here and defined this simple conf function that says, and this is the config subcommand. And what I can actually now do is maybe come back in here. And instead of doing this now, I can say handle, is it even public? Is public. Of course, config handler. So I come back in here and so config, oh, come on. Config handler, what is going on? I have in here, so let's see, is that even in scope? Of course it's not in scope. So I can come in here and now I can say pub mod command, and now it should all be in scope. So now I can simply say call my config handler like this, and then I can do exactly what I did before. So now I go back to config, and invoke the command as well, and I get exactly the same thing. So what we are doing now, of course, we've defined the base, the topmost command, which is also what we've defined over here in CLI. And then within this our topmost command, we now have two sub commands in for now, config and ticket. And now we can, of course, keep going deeper and deeper and nesting these subcommands. But I think there should be a limit. I am not sure of the number, but there is a limit actually. I think so. And but we can, for now, I think we should be fine. If we go say 2, 3, 4 levels down, we should still be fine. So but the point is now we have the option to go inside config and again treat config as if it were this topmost command, and then within it again we have the option of defining subcommands that would belong to the config subcommand itself. So subcommands is going to have subcommands and of course in that order until maybe we hit the limits. So it's as really as simple as this, working with this clap. Of course, I can indulge you to take your time and maybe look a little bit into this and see how it works anyways. But anyways, let's move on. Let's proceed from here. So what I can actually now do is now in the main file, maybe above our subcommands, up here I would like to define, because the way this would work, of course, is when a command comes in, it's going to come in with a couple of arguments. So those arguments we would like, of course, to parse them to exactly where they actually need to get to, and of course use them as we would intend to. So I would like to also define a template for receiving arguments specific for the configuration. And then so when those configurations, so when you visit the configuration subcommands and provide us those arguments, of course, we like to handle them accordingly and use them whichever way we would want to use them. Okay, so I'm going to come up here and define the struct, and I'm just going to call this config args. It's going to be like we already did. So here I would like to have my comments. So I can say command, and in here I say sub command, and come on. And down here I can say command. So this command is going to be, I'm just going to maybe say option. I'm going to make this optional maybe. And then I provide my config. How did I call it? I'm going to make it public actually. So config commands. So I come back to main, and where is it? Now I say config commands. And now this should, of course, get through to where we would want it to get to. And then up here, of course, we need to provide some implementation for that command to actually be valid. But anyway, before that, I would like to, of course, still do my derive. And in here, I like to have debug and args. And args, of course, should come from here. So args should come from here. And now after this, again, I'm going to have something like we already did here. I'm just going to copy this, maybe just this, and come down here. And let's see. So of course, coffee commands doesn't implement debug. So we'll just come in here and say debug, and that should also be fine. So the point now is we have configurations, and but our args now, instead of just being like a subcommand, is now a subcommand with subcommands. That's really the point. And what we can actually now do is to come over here and then hook this up here. So I can simply say config args. And then what it means, of course, is that here we again have to pass some args to this subcommand. But now the question would be, where do we actually get these arguments from? Again, this is actually quite straightforward. So here, all we actually have to do is to do something like this actually. And then in here now, we need to provide arguments that would be propagated to our command, of course, where we need them to be. So in here, I'm just going to call it args like this. And now, of course, this would not be available to this subcommand. So if when we get here, of course, we now have access to these. It actually seems we left the config we were working on and then moved over to tickets. Again, that's fine. I'm just going to cut this and bring it up here. And now here I simply again pass this, just call this args. And now we have this config args. So but now I need to come in here and actually say, oh, that we actually need access to this args. And again, I'm just gonna maybe still call this args, and these are gonna be from maybe as a reference config args. And now we have access to these, and in here we simply pass this args like this. And now this can now actually correctly propagate our config handler. And what is the problem here? Type is private, small private, and the item. Okay, so let me see. We'll take care of this sometime. And again, maybe I actually get rid of this. I don't need this anymore. That's fine. And maybe what I can do already is to install anyhow. And this is going to help me to much more easily handle errors. So I'm just going to come in here and anyhow, so let's go to 1.0 and give that a couple of seconds or maybe minutes. And now it is installed. So I can come back in here and maybe now I can say anyhow, and I want error. And now here I can actually say, or maybe actually, I say results. And now I say results, and it's not going to actually return anything. And what is the error? So of course I say okay. Okay, and now what we can actually now do, of course, I think everything should be fine. So maybe here I actually do something like this. Wait a minute, so what is the error? Let me see. Okay. I think that's actually how it should be. So the only thing, of course, is that maybe up here, I again say anyhow results. And of course, down here, I can simply change the signature of our function to return this. Let me see, what is the error? Of course, down here, I can simply say, okay. Okay, and now this should be fine. So of course, this is how I want the signature of this function to look like. Okay, so now let's continue. So now we have these sub commands, and what we would now actually do would be to go in here and now handle these args. So again, if you remember, this would be an enum. So what we can actually do now is we'll match args. Okay, and then of course it's gonna tell us we are not matching all the arms. So we have here config args or config commands. So let me see. Maybe what I can do here is maybe have a default that's maybe doesn't really do anything actually. So now what I can now do is I can come in here and now I say let's command. So command would now be something like I can say maybe args, that's command. And now I can actually say as ref, of course, as ref. And now here I have the option to now say unwrap or. And then if I'm not able to, if I encounter an error, I can now say config commands a default. And of course I need to close this up. So now I have my command and I can now actually match the command. Okay, so now I have the option now to match my command. So in here I can now say, of course, config commands. So when this is set, for example, what should we do? Maybe for now, we're still gonna do a print. So what's again config commands, and we say display. Again, it's gonna print something for us on the screen, whatever. And now maybe we handled, of course, the rest. So config commands. So when it is default, And again, something like this. I need to close this up. So basically something like this. I can now say, here I can say no matching commands found, something like this. And now maybe I can now actually cut this guy, get rid of it, and then put this in here. And now say, I can now say you visited display subcommand, and this one becomes set subcommand, something like this. And now let's bring up our terminal again, clear this up, and I'll say cargo run, and I'll say config. And it should now, of course, tell us no matching commands found. And now we can say config help. And we see again these subcommands that we've created. So now we can now say set, and it's going to say, oh, you visited the set command. Again, if we look at, again, you don't need to memorize all your commands. Always remember to use the help subcommand. That's always very handy. And now, so I can come back in here now and say config, maybe display. And now we get this. So we actually really getting somewhere. So again, what we are doing, of course, is, if you see, we are going from here, we get the command, and then we now try to propagate it to actually where it needs to go to. Okay, and so I'm also going to copy the same in here and do exactly the same. And instead of config, again, I'm now going to call it maybe ticket args. And then in here, again, I'm going to pass ticket args. So, and here, of course, I need to now have args. So this args now would, of course, become ticket args. So now the question would be, so now we have it, what are we doing with it? Again, I'm going to go back to what we did in config. I'm going to copy everything actually, and maybe get rid of the imports we don't need for now. I don't think we would need this. Come on, what did I do? So parser, go away. Okay, and now I copy everything and come to tickets and actually paste it. And I'll call this ticket commands. So ticket command should be able to list. For example, should be able to count. Should be able to, of course, I want to keep our default as well. So it should be able to list, it should be able to count, it should be able to maybe get a specific one, for example. It should be able to do that for us. So we have here, again, I'm going to replace all of this, not so much for now. So here would be, of course, list. So this would be count. We would have default always, of course. So I'm just going to copy this guy, duplicate it, put it down here, and rename this to get. And this should be fine. Do we have an error? What is the problem? Ticket command. Let me see. So of course we still have our config args here. So let me see. So let's go back to main. And so we have our ticket args. So here we still have our config commands. So now it should now be come on ticket commands. And now this should be able to pass the correct thing down here, and then of course should get down here. And so I'm gonna rename this again now to ticket handler. And then in here, I will now like to call, of course, ticket handler like this, and pass my args, and of course handle the error like this. And I'm just gonna get rid of this. And we seem to have an error. What is the error? Expected config args and found ticket. Really? Ticket, of course. So let's go to this handler, and here we still have our config args. It should be ticket args, and of course we don't need this anymore. I'm just gonna get rid of this, and I'll come back to main. So now this should be fine again. So the same thing we did before for the other one should now be possible here. So now we can now again say ticket help, for example, and now we see the commands we already created for this guy. So now we can say list, and of course it's still using, we did not make the changes. Again, I'm just gonna collapse this guy, go to tickets, and of course changes to, let's say, lists. So we are pretty sure that it's doing what we want to do. So this is count, this is get, and that's really it. So let's try that one more time. I'm going to expand this again. And now you can see we are able to get where we want to get. Again, we can always do help, and then we see where we are. So it's actually pretty straightforward like this. And so let's see what more we can actually do. It's not going to be too much. Again, I don't want us to repeat what we already covered in the past. That's going to just go ahead and make this video longer than necessary. So I'm just going to try to avoid all of that. Okay. So I'll come back in here and see what more additions we could make. I think this is actually looking good. So if I come over here to the config, and now so the question would be, so if I want to set and display and default, set display and default, these are probably of course going to require different arguments. And I would like to of course make sure they have those arguments they need. And in that case, what can actually happen now is I would like to, of course, set individual arguments that needs to get to these individual sub commands. And that's what we should be doing next. So what if I come down here and define a new module, and I can call this, let's say, config. So within what is the off, so I'm just going to say pub mod, actually not pub Tony. So in here I can actually define a set of functions. I can say I can call this set, and what is this going to do for me? So of course this should be able to set some configuration for us, and maybe I'm also just going to make it return as a result, just like we've been doing before. So in here, of course, I now need to say use anyhow result. And so with this now, I have this, I can still just say okay. Okay. And so, but I'm just gonna maybe, so we have set display. That's really basically all we have. So I'm just gonna copy this and duplicate it. And this would be display. Okay. So, but now, sorry. Now I would like us to, of course, define the arguments that would now be specific for these two different use cases. Sorry. And to do that, I can actually come up here and define, or maybe I can also come, no, let me define this up here. So in here, I can define, it doesn't actually need to be pub for now, I think, or let me make it pub struct, and I can say set args. So this will be the arguments that needs to go to our over here. So this can now actually be set args. Okay, so but to fulfill being where it is right now, we of course need to add some threads, as you can already imagine. So the first, of course, I would like to add is common derive. So it's going to have derive, and of course it's going to have args. And to do that, I'm just going to have to bring it in here. Okay. So it's going to have args, and of course I needed to have some more. So I'm just going to say, just like we did before, of course, so command. Oh, I hate this. I really hate this. I swear I hate this. And in here, I'm going to have version. I'm going to have about. And maybe I can say for now, long about would be none. Again, you have the option, of course, to set this to some interesting string. So in here, of course, this is the interesting part for me. So I need to, for sets, so let's say we would actually need to, let's say we have, of course, a database that's maybe behind an API, and would like to go through this API to actually retrieve the data. So in here, I would like us to say, I'll have some like API URL. String, because the point is that everything regards to configuration, this would be what you have to do just once, but when you're setting this up for the first time. So when you set this up, you should be able to say our app, blah, 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 set up, and then we set up this URL. And maybe also was something that's like API token. And what else? I think for now I'm just gonna keep it as simple as this. So our args would be able to set these two, and then with these two, it will now be able to, of course, do the basic things at least. So you should be able to retrieve all. When we have this setup, you should be able to retrieve, let's say, all tickets, and then when we have the ticket list, we can now take a certain ID and then retrieve that particular one. But this should be enough for now. Okay, so now for URLs, now I need to again provide some more info. So I can say arg, and within arg, I need to provide a lot of information. So I would like to say long. So long would allow me to, of course, use API URL as, maybe I'm just going to keep this simple. Let's just call it URL and token. Okay, we already know it's API. So long is going to allow us to use URL and token, but we can also do short. Short here would be a character. Okay, and here we need to specify what that character would be. So I can maybe call this U. So for URL, and so this would, of course, instead of typing it completely URL, we can simply say -u. So instead of saying hyphen URL, you can say -u. So that's really the point. And we can even make it interesting and make it capital U. And doesn't really matter. Again, you have to decide in the end how this should come in place, what should be used where. So just, of course, you don't repeat yourself. And even if you do repeat yourself, make sure it has to be only within like a given sub command. So I don't want to have you both in on the config and of course on the ticket. It's going to cause some confusions. Okay. So I can say require equals, and I'll set this to true. Okay, and I say value name. This is actually when I get to rename this, but again, I'm just going to call it URL. That's totally fine. And now I can say long help. So this would be the longer version of the help. That's what should happen. So we can actually say the URL of the API deployed API, turn it the other way around. Something like this. So that's the long help would of course tell you what's actually going on. Again, of course, you have the option of providing help. Again, I'm going to say the same thing. URL of the deployed API, something like this. And I think that's all for now. So these are some of the things you can actually say, but of course, this is only specific to URL. So for this, we also have to repeat ourselves again. So I'm going to make this T, and then here I'm going to call this again token. So this would be, I'm going to copy this token, um, token for authenticating to the deployed API, something like this. And I'm just gonna maybe copy it because I'm lazy to type it again. Okay, so now these are the args that would need to, of course, get to our set command. And of course, to use it again is actually pretty straightforward. So in here we have our args. And this would be our set arg. So that's when we use this, we would be able to, we would have access to these arguments, and then we can then pass it to wherever we would want to pass this. And what it means now is that in here, I can say args, and this args will now be of type set args. So I'm going to say use super. And now what I can actually do now is down here, we can now, I'm just going to maybe copy this. Now just, I'm doing this in steps, so you actually see us making the changes that we need to make. So in here now, I can say command config as a model, and now I can say it and I pass the args like this. And what is the problem? So expected set args found. So that's also fine. So we can pass this by reference. That's not a problem. And I think that's really it. That's really it. So maybe here I can also handle this actually. Because we are getting this here, and maybe here I can actually now, I don't know, maybe say they received args, something like this. I think we implemented the display. I'm not sure. We'll find out. I will say args, and now we can of course log this. So again, we can do the exact same thing for the other one, which is our what did we call it, our display. So again, I'm just gonna, so I think display should not let me see, display should not actually do anything. It should just be able to list some configuration for us, and then that should be it. Okay, so I think we actually done with this guy. We only need to bring this command up here. So I'm just gonna copy this guy, come up here, and this will now be display. Of course, it should take nothing. And maybe I can copy this guy. Oh, my bad, my bad, my bad, my bad, Tony. So this should actually have been here. And I'm just gonna get rid of this one and just bring it in here. That's really fine. So that's one way, of course, we can propagate our settings down to where it needs to be. So again, we can test this out. So let me see again, let's come back in here. I think we're working with config. So I'm gonna, again, config help. Again, I don't need to memorize this always. You have the help command handy. You can always use this. So now I can say, no, so now I have sets, and now I don't know what to actually do with sets, but now I need your help. So sorry, this should have been config and then set and then help. And now it says, oh, you need to provide a URL and a token, and that's also fine. So now we can say URL, some boring URL, and then token, some boring token. And I think I might need to actually do it like this. I'm not sure. Let me see. Let me see. Yes, I needed to do it like this. So now you see this also logs it for us. So again, the command, somehow we are able to pass it from the main command. Again, if you remember, it's first, I'm just going to collapse this guy. So it first needs to come in here. We parse it and then put it in the sub command. And even when it gets to the sub command, we need to figure out where it needs to go. It needs to go to set, and then we parse it again to this guy, and then we are able to invoke this function and use it how we would want to use it. Okay, so that's really the core of what I needed to show you today. But of course, you could be wondering, again, we can now really do the same for this guy. I'm just gonna maybe copy this. It's pretty straightforward. I'm just gonna copy this, come in here and paste it. And now I can call this ticket. So what we can do with this is, again, pretty straightforward. What we can do with this is quite simple. And I'm gonna go rid of this for now because I don't think we have any set acts yet. We don't have any of these sets. So, but I can come in here, copy this, and come back in mod. Again, this has to happen in steps. So in here, I would need to, so list, I don't think we need any arguments to list. We simply just say, oh, make a request, fetch all these tickets in our database, whatever, and give it to us. And count, also, we don't need to get anything. I think only gets would be where we need to provide, say, an ID. So I'm just going to get rid of all of this and change this to ID. And now this will become ID. Again, this will become capital I. So now we can say the ID of a given ticket. We do the same thing here. I think I can actually type this faster than I copy it. ID of a given ticket. Again, that's also what I would want to do in here. Do I have any errors? So args, again, I need to bring this in here, sub command args. Okay, and now we have this, and now all I can actually need to do now is to pass this to our get. So this is the only one that actually needs arguments, and I can simply just call this args, and then we have access to this. And then in here now I can actually say, let's handle, so list count get. So this would be list. It's not going to actually take anything actually. And we can simply say here the number of tickets is whatever, and then I'm going to say 23, whatever, it doesn't really matter. And again, of course, this is when we now query our database using data in and config. Again, I'm going to also show you how to have access to this config. Again, I will show you that in this video as well. So now we can actually do lists, and the next thing of course would be we have count. So I think this could have actually been count. So I say list. Again, say the tickets, maybe I say tickets, and again we list the ticket, whatever. And the last thing of course would be get. So get is actually only the one that will take an argument. So I say args, this will be a reference to, and I can call this I can call this get args. So in here I change this of course to get args like this, and now we have access to this. So what is the problem? So of course this is duplicated. So get. So this should now work out this way. So we have get. I can say the ticket ID is something like this, just actually show we're retrieving a given ID of a ticket. And here, of course, now would be get args. Okay. And what we can now do in here is to come in here now and say ticket, say list. Okay. And I'm going to get rid of this actually. And now I'm going to copy this and put this everywhere. So for count, this should again be count. For get, again, quite similar. I say get, but now I need to, of course, pass the args like this. And that's we've already taken care of this. And again, I can print this, say args, something like this, and then we have access to this actually. And then display, we really don't need this in here, so I'm really probably just gonna get rid of this. That's totally fine. Okay, and that's really all we have to do to do this. Again, if we bring this up, for example, and again do the same thing, I don't need to set this again. I'm just gonna say tickets and say help, and then we should be able to see what's possible within the tickets list. And now we can say tickets, maybe list. So we have list count get, so list, and then we simply say this. And now we say again count. It should be doing the same thing for us. And now the same thing, of course, is get, I think. Again, I don't need to memorize this. I say help one more time. So it's actually get. And why are you complaining? What is the problem? Of course, I need to provide ID. So I say ID is equal to some boring ID like this. And then of course this should get through again. So that's really one cool way we can build like a quite robust CLI application. From what we've done so far, you can actually see that this is really straightforward and quite easy to do. So now what I would like to do is to actually show you how you can store the configuration information you get from the user, and which is of course what you have in here. So when you set this up for the first time, we want to be able to get this URL and the token and then save this somehow, somewhere, right? But we don't want to be able to, we don't want a user to have to set this up each time they would want to use our CLI application. That would be like super boring and quite annoying, to be honest. So what I would like to show you now is to how we can actually persist this in some secure location, the user's PC, and then we always have access to this anytime we need it. So to do that, I'm just going to collapse the sky and then come over to Cargo Tomo. And in here, I need a quite interesting package called Comfy. And Comfy, I'm just going to get 0.6. I think this should be latest. I'll have to verify this much later. So this is the ticket, the crate we actually need to be able to work with our configuration. Environment variables, persisting this locally within this user's local PC, and then having access to this, of course, when we need it. So we're just going to give this a couple of seconds or maybe minutes to install, and then I'll show you how we can quickly use this. Quite easy to use. Okay, so the installation is complete. I'm just going to move over to the main file, and we would right now, of course, start to set things up. So, of course, this would really be quite straightforward to use. Okay, so before we do this, of course, there are some things we would need to set up for this to actually work the way we'd expect it to work. So what I would like to do is I'm just going to come over to, I'm just going to collapse all of this so we have more room to work. And I would also like to close up these new files or these open files. Yeah, I really don't want to see them clutter my space. Okay, so now everything is cleared out and now I can actually come into here. What I would like to really do is to define an app state, and that's going to allow me to again define like a default app config. That's going to help us more or less define like a template as to how the default arguments like that would define of course our app state should look like. Okay, so in here I'm going to create a struct. Maybe I'll do something like this. I say pop creates, and I'm just gonna, of course, I'm probably just call this app config, something like this. And now I need to define some of the parameters this needs to have, but of course, before then, I would like to define some traits for this struct. So I say derive. Of course, I need debug. I need serialize, and I also need deserialize. Okay, that's mostly all I need. So, but in here now, I need to, of course, get something that is in line with, of course, what we defined before. So I'm gonna have one here that says, I don't know if should I make this public. I'm not sure yet, but I can say API URL. This is gonna be a string, pretty straightforward. And the next thing, of course, would be I can say API token, and this would again be a string. And but even before this, I would like to define some characteristics of our app. So I'm gonna give it a name. Our app needs to have a name. So I'm just gonna call it's still gonna be a string. Okay, and what else? I think that should be it for now. Yeah, I think that should be it. Okay, so this will be the name of this is what I would like us to have. And then for this app states, I would like to define some more characteristics. And maybe one thing I can also add in here already, just thinking about it, would be an app. I can call this app path. This is going to be of type path buff. Yes, thank you. This one is going to be of type path buff. So I want to give the user, of course, the opportunity to be able to define where they would like this configuration file to live. And if this is not provided, then I would, of course, jump in and give them a default one. Okay. So I would like to, of course, the next thing I would like to do here is to implement default for our crates. So I can simply say sct, and I would like to go to default, and of course default, and I'd like to implement this for our app config. And of course I need to implement the, how is it called again, default. So fn default. And so now in here, of course, I need to return my app config, and I need to provide everything that you already see in here. So for app name, this is going to be quite straightforward for me, if you ask me. So this would actually be the name of our cargo. I'm just going to take the name we have in here in our cargo terminal. So this is going to be the name I want. So cargo, of course, gives me a quite interesting way to have access to this using the cargo pkg name. So I can simply say env, and I provide the name, so it should be in all caps, cargo pkg name. So, and this is the name, and this is of course a string. Again, I also have the option to maybe even type this. And so it's pretty straightforward. So it should be static, and string, of course, is exactly the same thing. So in here now, I can actually pass my app name and app path. For my app path, I'm probably just gonna maybe, for now, I will leave this out for now. Maybe I'll make this optional actually. Okay. So in here, I can say app path for now. I will see, let's see how that goes. So API URL, again, this would all be empty, of course, when our app gets initialized. So in here, I can simply say something like string.new. And I do the same, of course, for my API token. So this will be string.new. And what is the problem? So of course, this is This is a string, and of course we are expected to provide. So I can simply, I would now have to actually duplicate this, but that's also fine. So say app name that's to string. Okay, so now I've implemented default, so we can of course initialize our app the way we now have access to the default traits implemented for our struct. And the next thing, of course, I can now do in here would be to implement some more functionalities for our app. So I can simply say app config, and now I can define some more things I would like this to have, for example. So this is actually where we can do things like, I don't know, updates, let's say our API URL or API token or whatever the case might be. Okay, and of course we can also use the builder pattern if we wanted to also kind of like make it interesting for us. So, but I'm going to keep this as simple as possible. So because of that, I'm just going to go to the config and look at the commands we just implemented. So we have one called set args, and what I would like to do basically is to use this media to actually set up the configuration. So I'm just going to implement one function in here. So I'm just going to call this, this is going to be a public function. I'm going to say update config. That's all it's going to do. So it's going to, of course, take mutable reference to self. And but other than this, I would like to have access to two things. I would like to have access to a token, of course. It should be, come on, a string, and of course a URL, which again should also be a string. I'm going to keep it as simple as possible. And it's not going to return anything. I actually don't think there is any need to return anything at this point. But what it's going to do for us is actually pretty straightforward. So what I would like to do here, I can say let's config and actually create a new app config like this. And now I can actually add every other thing here I need to add. So one would be app name. So app name, I already have access to this. I can say self.app name and I clone this, for example. And what else? Maybe I will get rid of this for now. I don't see the need. But anyways, let's say app path. Say self.app path dot clone. I'm gonna clone this as well. And now I can say API token will of course be token, and API URL will be URL. And now I have a new instance for my app config. And now what I need to do is actually pretty straightforward. I now need to call the package we installed, and I call the store method. And you see here, I need to provide an app name, the config name, and of course, the actual config itself. So in here, of course, I already have my app name, on which I can exactly take from here, from self. So we have an app name, config name. I'm just going to set this to none for now. And our config, of course, will be what we defined up there. Okay, and so what's we get back from this, of course, is actually an enum. So what I can actually do is to match this operation and then handle the two scenarios. So when everything is okay, nothing is actually returned. So I can simply give a user a feedback and something like I can tell the user appcon, maybe let me space this out, app config was successfully updated, something like this. And when we actually get an error, for example, we have access to this error. So I'm probably also going to do the same thing to the user, and I'm just going to do print line for now. So we can handle this, of course, in more robust ways, but I think this should be sufficient for now. So now I can say there was an error updating config, something like this. I will say error, and then I would like to, of course, display this here. Come on. So now I can simply just pass the error like this, and that should be fine. And now we have access to we now have a way to, of course, update our config. So, but the thing now is, how do we actually propagate this from main? So it needs to, of course, somehow go from here to, of course, to where it needs to be. This is actually quite interesting thing. And this should, of course, be the same thing for both, because, of course, these two would need access to those important informations we have stored in an app config. Quite pretty straightforward. So to have access to that, what I'm actually going to do is to come over to our main file, and I'm going to create a variable called config. And what this is going to do for me is to basically help me to load my config file. So here I can simply call config.load. Again, as you can see here, I need to provide an app name and, of course, a config name as well. So I'm just going to maybe also come here, copy this guy, just to be sure that this also is always consistent. So I have my app name and config name. I'm just going to set this as none for now. I don't really need this for now. Okay, so and I close up this string. And now, of course, I need to specify what is actually coming back here. So now this should be able to, we should be able to have, how did we name it again? So app config. So this should now come from utils app config. So this is what this should of course look like. And we need to handle an error, because again, this would return an enum for us, more or less, so but we can handle this way. And now we have access to our config. So now I would like to make this mutable actually. And now having this, I would now like to be able to, of course, propagate this to all our handlers. Okay, so now I need to go in here. I need to, of course, make it actually the first thing I pass to all our handlers. So I can say mutable config. So you should be able to take our config, of course, and then the args. And then I can come in here and, of course, replace this now with what I need to comment in here. So in here, I can, of course, define a new argument. Of course, this should still be config. So it should be a mutable reference to utils. That's app config like this. I'm pretty straightforward like this. And I'm just going to copy this one again, come back to main, go to this one, and then put it in front as well. Okay, so let me see. Utils, is this not in here? So again, mutable cfg, and now we have access to this. And so let me try again, utils app config. So now we have access to these two. And now I can actually go back to main. And so everything actually looks great. So of course, what this function is going to do for us is, if this is not doesn't exist yet, it's going to create it for us. And maybe before this point, what I would also like to do is to maybe come in here after this point, and then I can say let path. Path would be equal to, I'll say config dot that should be let me see, load path. No, not load path. Get the configuration file path. I think this one. And then again, this would be none. And come on, this should go to the end. And again, I have a result. So I need to, of course, handle it this way. And now I can actually maybe print this. So print line. So I can say config path. And in here, I now provide path dot, I think I get a display, something like this. Yes. And so this should be able to show me actually where this is stored. So I'm just going to open this up and maybe clear my screen. And I simply maybe run ticket, for example, and help, because I just want to see what happens in the end. So let's see. So give that a couple of minutes to build, or maybe seconds, hopefully, I'm not sure. And then we see what we get in the end. So if you come up here, you actually see where this is actually installed. So this goes, of course, into my app data, and then down in here, and then it creates a folder for us called CUST-SUP, like we defined, and then it has a config, and then it has a default config. Again, this is why I'm not giving this config a name. Of course, if you give it a given name, that will live here, and then you have the option now to actually work with multiple configuration files, and all of those will of course live within this config folder. But again, that was why I said I didn't really need this, because I didn't think of course this would be that complex. But just to let you know that that's also possible, you have the option to actually do this. And then if I actually open this up, and you see here it's instantiated this for us, of course, with those default parameters. Okay, so to wrap this up, what I would like us to do now is, now that we have access to this, I would like these functions also have access to those information. So in here, I would like to go in here and change this, of course. So apart from this, you should be able to again take a config. We should also be immutable. No, it shouldn't be immutable. I don't want it to make it mutable. So it should be utils and app config. So it should just have access to this. And then in here, now I can now pass this config. And or maybe because I'm actually going to set, I need to make this mutable actually. Okay. And but this already is of course mutable, so that's also fine in here. So now what I would like to do is, so this display, what it should do for us would now be to of course load those configurations that we already set and then show that to us. So I'm just going to implement a new function here. So apart from update config, I want to a function that says display config, and it's just going to do exactly the same thing, of course, like we did in the main function, like what we did here. So I'm really actually just going to copy that. Let me see. No, I'm still going to do a load, so I can say config.load. So it's going to load, and let me see, it takes 2 arguments, but 3 were supplied. So it should be able to load our default config for us. And then I would like, of course, to show this to, like, for the user to, of course, see this. So to do that, again, I'm going to do exactly what we have. I'm going to do something interesting. So I can say, for example, let config. So config will now be equal to this. Okay. And again, I need to type this actually. So this would, of course, be of type utils app config. I thought I had utils within the scope. Nope, I didn't. Okay, so I'm going to comment this out for now. And let me see, utils. Oh, come on, help me out here. App config. No. I think it's just config for now, because this should be a result. And let me see. So I'm just gonna do some modifications in here to make this interesting. I don't want this to be long. This is really getting long actually. And now this should of course come from anyhow. So say anyhow result. Okay, and now we have, do we have access to this? Let me see. What is the problem? Expected in result is found. Yes, of course, that's totally fine. Maybe down here I can simply say an okay. Okay, so now we have access to our config, and of course now I need to take care of this. Now we just get one thing back, but now we need to type it. So this would be, of course, app config. So we now have our app config, and I don't want to do all of this. So I'm simply just going to print this to the user. Okay. So I'm just going to print this and say the app config, and we implemented a display, I guess. So now I need to just pass config. Okay. And that's really it. And in here, what is the problem? Expected to pull blah, blah, blah. Let me see. Okay, so now let me go back to config. So in here, I would now, of course, like to have access to, we already have this implemented, of course. So now I would like to pass this down to this guy. So I'm just gonna copy this again, copy. And here it actually doesn't need to be mutable, doesn't really matter. And again, I need to pass this here. So config. Okay, and now what we can simply do here is to say config dot display config. Display config shouldn't take any arguments. Sorry, my bad. So I got rid of all of this. And let me save that. And of course, blah blah blah. Let me see. Of course, I got rid of more than I should have. Okay, so now I have this. Um, let me see. Of course, so now this should be fine. So now we can easily log our current app config. So I can come back in here and get rid of this. We don't need this anymore. Let me see, and this should be fine. Okay. And what is the error? Cannot borrow as mutable as is blah blah blah. So it's also fine. I actually have no need to modifying this, so this should not be a problem for me at all. And now my IntelliSense is frozen. I'm gonna give that a couple of minutes to unfreeze actually. Okay, so what I can actually do is to maybe make this mutable, and let's see. So now this is fine. Of course, I need to handle this. So what is the problem? Why is it taking forever? Of course, I'm handling this. My PC is getting slower and slower by the minutes, and I cannot explain why. So now we have our display set up. As you can already imagine, here is also quite straightforward. So instead of, maybe we don't need to do this anymore because the display is going to take care of things for us. And also here, we don't need to do this anymore because that's also going to take care of for us. So now we can call config.update config. And now we have our args.token, and again args.url like this. And of course, I handled this way. So let me see what is the problem. They blah, blah, blah. So anyway, let me take this out and then see. So it's a problem. So they move out of, so to keep this simple, I'm just going to clone these guys. Um, oh, I hate this HTML thing. And so that's really one way we can take care of this. And again, I'm just going to make it similar to this. Let me see. No, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. There's no need to make any further changes in here. So what we're doing here now is when we start the app, of course, is gonna initialize with default values, but we have the option of us again providing this using this command in here, and then when we have access to this, we can now go back in here, and our tickets, of course, would now have access to this guy, and then we can of course pass them everywhere. So in here we can again pass our configs just like we did already for config already. We can do the same for tickets so that our functions again will have access to this, and then we'll now use it to then maybe make queries and stuff like that. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, so now let's see what we have. So say cargo run, and I go to config, for example, and I say help, just to see where we are. I don't need to memorize anything again. Remember, you have that help function there handy to always, or so you should always use it actually. So now I can say this config display, and now it shows us our current settings. As you can see, this is none, the API URL is empty, token is URL. Again, I'm probably just going to open this on VS Code. Let me see if I can open that, and now it's open. And now I try to call the next command, so we actually set things up. So we have the set command. Again, I don't need to memorize what I need to provide. I always have this help handy. So I have to provide the URL and the token. So again, I'm going to say URL. The URL would be, I can say some boring URL. some boring URL at Gmail, whatever, at yahoo.com, and token would be some boring and meaningless token, something like this. And now this sets our configuration for us. As you can see here, it also gets updated quite right away. So the cool thing is if you have this configuration, you can set them up this way. And after that, you can then use your CLI to do whatever it is you want to do. Of course, you can increase this to take, of course, any form of data structure you want to put in here, be it vector, slices, or whatever, doesn't really matter. And but the cool thing is that you have the option to actually have this configured this way, and you can now go ahead and of course bring your logic into those commands and make them do quite interesting things. So, but anyway, guys, this is actually where we'll draw the cuts. This is already like a quite long one. I never really anticipated to be this long, but anyways, yeah, it happens. But guys, that will be all for now. Yeah, remember, of course, if you're new, just go ahead and subscribe. The videos will bring to you are always interesting, meaningful ones that you can, of course, always even use at your workplace. Doesn't really matter. The point is to share the knowledge, of course, have it go around. Anyway, guys, so just go ahead and subscribe, stay in the loop. Would notify you when we have any new content and interesting one. If you have any questions, any suggestions, if anything is not clear, whatever the comment might be, of course, feel free to reach out to me, and I will always get back to you as soon as I can. And that will be all for today, guys. And until see each other next time, have a lovely week.